Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure to work on these ceramics in the Fitzwilliam, which are very lovely. I don't know if you can all bring to mind what ceramics from Samarkand look like. Samarkand has a long history of fine ceramics production, and the Fitzwilliam mainly concentrates its collection on pieces from the Timurid period in the 15th century and a few 19th century pieces. But the first piece I'm going to show you is in fact a Chinese piece. The study of Timurid ceramics is dependent on a close understanding of the history of blue and white porcelain production in China, and that's why I'm showing this, which is a fantastic yuan piece in the Fitzwilliam. These type of blue decorated wares were produced in the city of GIngo in northern Jiangxi province from the first half of the 14th century, and they were exported in huge numbers across Asia. It's a case, in fact, that the development of this new blue and white style, it wouldn't actually have happened without the involvement of Arab and Persian merchants who commissioned the pieces for sale across the Middle East, but also there were Persian craftsmen who were involved in the initial making of this blue and white in Jingdezhen. We can get some idea of the scale of the exports at this time from the numbers of blue and white pieces that have survived in 3 royal collections. The largest one is in Delhi, in a palace built by Firuz Shah Tughlaq, and that's the least well-known collection. But there are also important Persian court collections, which finally ended up in the Ardabil Shrine in northwest Iran, and of course in the Topkapi in Istanbul. At this moment, we have no idea to what extent Chinese porcelain was in use at the Timurid court. But we do have the account of a Spanish envoy, Ruy González de Clavijo. He traveled to Samarkand in 1403, just 2 years before Timur died, and he left a very interesting account in which he mentions that members of the Timurid court were served food, and I'm quoting, on dishes of what is known as porcelain, and these last much esteemed and of very high price. So we don't know if an object like this would have been at Timur's court, but we can suspect that it might have been. When you look at this jar, there are 2 elements that are very distinctive because they're going to have a huge impact on the subsequent production of copies of blue and white. And one is the decoration around the rim, which is actually of crashing waves, and also these large lotus leaves and the motif of a duck, as Dr. Melville already mentioned, the duck and the leaves on the pond. So this is another bowl in the Fitzwilliam. It doesn't look very much. It's a bit dirty and a little bit broken. But in its heyday, in the moment it was made, it would have been a nice clear blue and white. And I think you can see that the decoration in the center is derived from the decoration of the piece that we saw just now, the jar. It's got lotus leaves and lotus flowers and the sort of stems. Now, I want to show you this piece here because you can see that's exactly what the piece that was made in Samarkand is derived from. Now, that's a piece that was made in Jingdezhen in China. How did this Chinese pieces, were they being copied directly in Samarkand? Well, in fact, there were a few steps that happened in between. Timur had sacked Syria, principally Damascus, in 1400. And we know from that same Spanish envoy that he collected up craftsmen and he took them back to Samarkand. So this piece here is a piece that was found and excavated at Hama after, and we could tell from the way the objects had been burnt, that this was after the conquest of the city. And we can see that in Syria, in the mid-14th and later century, that they were making blue and white ceramics copying the Chinese pieces. These craftsmen thereby were taken to Samarkand, and they would then be using the same techniques they'd been using in Syria to make a piece like the one on the left. So that's the chain of transmission. We start from Jingdezhen in China, move to Syria, the pieces were exported to Syria, they're copied there, and then those same craftsmen are taken to Samarkand. In fact, we probably have evidence of blue and white pieces being made even before this arrival of the Assyrian craftsmen. And this is a little incense burner. I think you can just see that it's on little feet, and the feet are in the shape of lions. And this is actually a type that was being made long, long before this. We have this piece here is a piece from the 12th century in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's a metal piece, and it's being copied in ceramics. It's a very charming piece in the Fitzwilliam, and it's completely unique. This bottle, which I think we already saw, as you can see, it's got a band of ducks or birds swimming around it, and it's broken. You can see at the neck. It would have actually had another section, and this is the direct comparison. It's not actually in the Fitzwilliam, but I wanted you to be able to see what a piece like this is being modelled on. You can even see that around the neck there are those kind of cartouches which are being copied directly. It's got a different kind of decoration around the body, but you can see on the piece on the right, the Chinese piece, is a wine bottle, and we have very much evidence of these types of wine bottles being exported to Asia, and they very often appear in Persian paintings. So far we've only looked at blue and white pieces, but they weren't the only ones to be made in Samarkand at this time. The second most important colour scheme was using black painted onto the body and then covered in a turquoise glaze. This was a very old colour scheme that had been again used in Iran and indeed in Syria from the 12th century onwards. You can see two birds on the bowl, and there's a sort of feathery tree. And the type of painting, this type of design, is actually, we have some comparisons with some buildings in and around Samarkand on the wall painting, which sort of situates it in Samarkand. This particular dish once belongs to a collector called Oscar Raphael. He was around in the first half of the 20th century, and he exhibited this particular piece. He lent it to a very, very major exhibition, one of the first important exhibitions of Persian art here in London, which was at Burlington House. Now we call it the Royal Academy. And I found this photograph, which is of the actual gallery where this piece was displayed. And underneath you can see I just shot the little section from the catalogue. When it was being exhibited in 1931, they thought it was from Syria. You can see it says probably Syrian 15th, is it 15th or 14th century? 14th century. Whereas now, in fact, I can prove by comparison with other pieces that this was a piece that was being made in Samarkand. In 1411, Shah Rukh, the son of Timur, decreed that all of the craftsmen who had been brought to Samarkand should be allowed to leave the city. And Ulugh Beg, who was the son of Shah Rukh, enacted this legislation, and he released all the craftsmen. And this meant that all of the production of ceramics that had been happening in Samarkand, these craftsmen were allowed to return to where they'd come from. And as a result, we get a lot of different centres popping up where blue and white, particularly blue and white ceramics, were being made. The dish that you see here on the left is a piece that was probably made in Nishapur as a result of this diaspora of craftsmen. It's got a very lovely, again, it's a little bit damaged, but you can see it's got a lovely series of 3 pomegranates and a banana leaf in the center, and it's still got the kind of crashing waves around the rim. It's no longer really so much imitating the type of yuan wares that we were looking at earlier. It's actually got closer relationship to the next period of Chinese ceramics, which is the Ming period. And this particular dish on the right, which could have served as inspiration for the piece on the left, is one of which we've got an example in the Ardabil collection in northwest Iran. Before I run out of time, I've just got 2 more slides. I just wanted to talk to you about architectural tiling. Now, one of the glories, as I'm sure you all know, one of the glories of all the buildings in Uzbekistan, built in the 15th century, is the tile work. There are 5 little polygonal tiles in the Fitzwilliam collection, and I've just put 3 of them up on the screen. They were apparently collected from the tomb of the granddaughter of Tamerlane, Timur, and dated by 1445. This is the collector, who was called Henry Scipio Reitlinger. He put this note on it. Now, unfortunately, this tomb has never come to light. It was not in the Shaizinda complex nor elsewhere, but it's very interesting to have this bit of documentary evidence. I would show you, though, the type of building where these tiles could have come from. You can see this is just below the dome of the tomb, and just underneath you can see this type of tiles. And actually, more significantly, there's a madrasa in a city called Hargir, which has the soffit of an arch, which has a series of polygonal tiles just like these, set around some 12 and 10-pointed stars. But we don't know. It's quite possible that that little note that says from the tomb of the granddaughter of Tamlane was the dealer who was wanting to sell his tiles for more money, so he gave them a very, very nice distinctive provenance. So the last two pieces, and there are three like this, were produced in the 19th century. Again, in Samarkand, but also in Bukhara, this group of objects. They're really, really attractive. They're covered in a slip, and then they have different coloured glazes on them with these kind of abstract designs. And they were very popular with Western travellers in the 19th century who collected them and brought them home as souvenirs, and then subsequently quite a lot of them ended up donated to British museums. So there's some in the Victoria and Albert, and these, of course, are in the Fitzwilliam. They were collected, these particular dishes were collected by Dr. Glacier, who was a mathematics lecturer at Trinity College, Cambridge, and he collected a huge number of ceramics, which he then gave to the university on his death. So as I think you can see, although it's a small collection, it's a very fine collection. It's got some very lovely objects in it. Thank you.